I want to talk to you a little bit about beekeeping from a sort of Irish perspective and how we're adapting to changes, all the changes that are happening. Great to hear all of the perspectives from everybody. You know, we talk about bees the whole time and how they're affecting. I've always considered the bee, it's sort of the canary in the coal mine at this stage. We don't really know all the factors of why the bees aren't doing so well. You may not be aware, but pretty much in the main, wild bees are pretty much gone. There are some in certain places surviving okay, but not doing very well. In Ireland, there aren't wild bees. Most of Europe, there aren't wild bees. This is honeybees now, not bumblebees. They're wiped out because of a mite that we've talked about, that Kirk was talking about, and because of the methods that we do agriculture, the way we handle bees, I suppose. So, had the capacity to cause this damage by moving bees around different places that maybe we shouldn't have moved around in the first place, but we also have the capacity to maybe help them out as well. So, and that's what we're trying to do, and I'll talk a bit more about what we're trying to do in Ireland about it. I just want to talk about one quick thing, by way of introduction to what I'm doing. So I have a company called Advanced Science, and we make a product for honeybees. It's natural extracts, particular seaweed extracts. Seaweed extracts are now being used in the animal feed industry as a replacement for, not a direct replacement, but as a way of weaning off antibiotics and other sort of chemicals which cause issues. Europe since 2006 has banned the use of prophylactic use of antibiotics, whereas other countries are still using antibiotics routinely daily because it gives slightly more production, and this obviously causes antibiotic resistance, which obviously feeds into us. So that's what we're trying to do in Advanced Science, is develop natural products, and we have a natural product for beekeepers that basically helps them. It's a natural immune stimulant, but it's also a particular antifungal. As a fungus that bees get, again, it's transferred over like the varroa mite has from a different bee from Asia, which if we didn't have European bees everywhere and weren't moving bees around everywhere, would never have gotten to US or Europe. The main thing I want to focus on, though, is part of what we're doing in agriculture is homogenizing the genetic material that we have, and because X animal or X bee is considered to be a better, more productive bee, we'll go with that. And in beekeeping, all the honey that's produced, 99% of the honey that's produced in the world is from the European honeybee, the Apis mellifera. And that's used all around the world, from Vietnam to Chile to America to South Africa. It's all the European honeybee. It's all used, and it's, in particular, it's one or two subspecies of that, the European honeybee. There's all these different subspecies. In Europe, there's 6 or 7. There's about 25 plus subspecies of the honeybee around the world. But we're focused around the world on only a handful of them, probably three in the main. And this, as I mentioned, this whole movement of our bees back and forth, sharing different bees, has allowed for at least 3, if you include the tracheal mite, major diseases that the European bee hasn't had a chance to catch up with. And it's because of this mite in particular that basically this mite not only just kills, it came from the Asian honeybee, transferred over and spread very quickly all around the world. Australia is the only place I think that doesn't have it. And it's not just the mite sucking on the bee itself, but it's the viruses the mite carries that actually debilitates the hive. And you might find a wild swarm somewhere. It might survive a year or two, but a year 3 or 4, in general, it's gone. It won't survive. So going back to the subspecies and stuff, what we focus on in general is particular strains of bees. We like them, we keep focusing, we keep moving on them. That basically starts to eliminate the other smaller, less popular subspecies. And Kirk touched on it earlier. I don't know, I think it's still the case to a greater extent that the majority of people, especially amateur beekeepers maybe in the US, would buy their beekeeping stock from not one or two, but a very limited number of suppliers. So you're a very limited number of bee genetic material is coming from. Now more and more people like Kirk's one of the people pioneering this, but it's the same in Europe as well. We're narrowing down our bee stock because we're reliant on breeders to give stuff. We don't adapt our own bees to our local environment. So in the States, what was happening, a lot of the bees were being produced in the south of the States. They were being sent up to northern US, and they weren't surviving the winters because they hadn't adapted. So what I'd be very particularly keen on is getting bees to adapt to local environments and to be able to keep it sustainable. And the fact that there isn't any wild bees anymore means that the bees are much more under threat, because it's not like you have some indigenous populations able to hold the genetic material there for you. It's basically it's whatever the beekeeper is doing in that area. If there's no beekeeper there, there's most likely no bees there. So it's whatever the beekeeper is doing, he is influencing what's happening to the bees. So going a bit more specific then into Ireland, the orange that's there on the presentation there is where the Apis mellifera, which is the northern dark bee, which is the bee that you can find in Ireland. That's where it used to be spread all across there, Ireland, into France, Germany, Eastern European countries, and all the way into Russia. Nowadays, and this is in the space of about 100 years or less, in some areas much more recently, you have AMM, Apis mellifera, the dark bee, only in in an uncompromised state, shall we say, in Russia, small parts of Russia, and Ireland is one of the last places that has good genetic material that hasn't been thoroughly compromised. So what happens, beekeepers bring in different strains of bees, they interbreed, and you start compromising your stock. There's a Maltese bee subspecies, there's a Sicilian subspecies, and these are all under threat as well, because beekeepers decide, okay, I'm going to bring in this bee because maybe it's more productive at this current time. And you know, climate change is happening all the time. We don't know. We were just talking about just before the start. We don't know what's the subspecies we're going to need. Maybe it's the ones adapted to the Maltese condition. Maybe it's the ones adapted to Sicily. Maybe it's the one that's adapted to Irish climate. You also have, of course, the more you sort of mono-strain your genetic material, the more you narrow it down, the less possibility you have for stuff like disease resistance when a new disease comes, a new threat comes in. So it's important to keep a variety of genetic stock, and it's not something that everyone's aware of. So in Ireland, we're doing stuff to promote so we have this Apis mellifera, and we reckon we have our own ecotype. So we have this subspecies that has adapted to the Irish climate. You probably all know Ireland's pretty wet. It's pretty windy, and it's pretty mild, I suppose. It doesn't get very warm, but it doesn't get very cold either. So we have a bee in Ireland that would fly in wetter weather, in windier weather, and it's more frugal with stores because we have a very short window when there's nectar, so it's much more conservative with stores. So it knows, you know, I don't build up too early, I'll hold on to my food stock and I'll wait for the right period. To the point that I know people who have swapped queens in two parts of Ireland, one in the Midlands, one on the far west coast. And the one on the far west coast, the season starts a lot later, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later. And when they put that queen over in the Midlands, sure enough, it builds up 3 weeks later than the rest of the babies that were in the Midlands, because it's adapted to its local environment. So we've set up the Native Irish Honeybee Society, and the idea of it is to promote our own strain of Apis mellifera, because people are bringing in different strains, and once they start, because the drones go out and they fly and they'll mate with any queen they can find. And there's these drone congregations are in drones from all the different, this is the male bee will come from all different areas. So you could be getting them from all the different subspecies, and you have the problem of it's not like cows. You keep cows in the field, they don't go hopping over the walls to try to mate with other cows. Well, they probably do, but it's not, you can control it to some extent. Whereas with the bees you can't, and plus to maintain, if people want to bring in different subspecies, to maintain that they got to keep bringing in different queens, different genetic material to keep the species going. And again, like Varroa, which wiped out our wild bees, you have the risk of bringing in new diseases the whole time, because you're bringing in new stock all the time. So we set up a group to promote it, to make beekeepers aware of what's going on, what you're doing if you are bringing different bees, what the consequences of that are, and how it's affecting all the other beekeepers around you. So someone brings a different bee and they're mating with everyone else's bees. And of course, it's not always obvious, but the hybridized bees, so the bees that are mixing different subspecies, tend to get very aggressive, which is another side effect as well. So we're running workshops, we're educating people on this, and we're also being very keen, very, very important to educate people on how they can make their own queens, how they can find out which stock is good and how to reproduce that, how to assess their stock, look at it and go, okay, I want to breed from that one. I don't want to go and buy another queen from somebody else, or buy another hive from somebody else who I don't know where his bees are from or what he's doing. And my bees have adapted to whatever field I'm in and whatever part of the country I'm in, whatever climate I'm exposed to. And that's what we're doing. So we're doing lots of different stuff, promoting them. From awareness, we have a little sticker you can put in your jar if you have the native bees, to make people aware as well of the jar of honey, that this is coming from native bees, and to promote that. And we're also working on what Kirk has spent a lot of time doing. So Kirk took a big gamble. Beekeepers are not willing to take a big gamble. We're doing a slightly slower method of trying to breed varroa resistance into our bees in Ireland. So we've set up a project working with the university there and a couple of universities actually, and the goal is to try and, so all bees have a certain amount of ability to be able to handle this varroa mite. That's a larvae there, it's those browny things on the larvae, they're varroa mites, and they'll suck on that larvae, and if they don't kill it straight away, it'll get some virus, and eventually it's not going to survive very well, and they'll be, you'll have high numbers of varroa mites in the hives, and they just destroy the hive. So bees have innate ability to do things like groom themselves to get the varroa mite off, or to before just after the cell gets capped with the pupa, before it goes to metamorphosize, before it comes out as a bee, the bees will smell out the varroa and they'll uncap that cell and force the varroa out, which will stop the cycle. There's lots of different things they can do and there's lots of different ways of them handling varroa. So our goal is to educate beekeepers in that, look, this is there, they have a certain amount of ability to do this, but we're constantly blanket treating. So we constantly used to be synthetic chemicals, now it's more natural chemicals to blanket treat. So we're actually deselecting for an ability to defend against varroa. So we're teaching them a tool of assessing their hives, see which ones are better able to handle varroa. And then now we've given them the tool as well to breed hives, and so now we're saying, okay, if these ones are better and they're good hive and they're better handled varroa, pick those when you go to reproduce your stock. So the idea is that slowly over time we'd be able to get our bees better and better able to handle varroa and be using fewer and fewer treatments. It's not a quick fix, it'll take years, we're talking 10, 15 years, but the whole time you're essentially improving your stock the whole time along the way. And I suppose the big goal there is that we get bees back in the wild again. If we don't get bees back in the wild, we're forever treating. I mean, there's huge areas that are not exposed. I mean, with beekeepers, you're basically relying on what's around you. So there's no, for where there is areas that aren't bees, there's huge gaps. So like there's no interbreeding. There's, how do I describe this right? If you take the island and say there's in the middle of Ireland, there's no beekeepers. There's no intermingling of that stock up there and that stock down there. There's no genetic diversity. You straight away, and we've huge problems with people who keep bees and there aren't your other people, and they can't get their queens mated because there aren't any drones around.